All right, let's give it maybe one more minute and then we'll get our show on the road, okay?
All right.
Actually, you know what? I'll start as we're waiting for people to file in. I will start going through a couple of Adcraft announcements. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. So just a couple of things we've got coming up. Tomorrow at noon, we are kicking off a new series at Adcraft called the Agency Spotlight. And so this is a monthly webinar series that we'll be doing that will focus on different Detroit-based agencies and their people, their work, their culture, and all of the great work that they do. So tomorrow at noon, GTB. It will be the global CEO, Robert Gay, who will be speaking with us. So we'd love for you to join us. Registration closed at noon. If by chance you're interested in attending, please just shoot me a note and I can send you over that Zoom link. And then we've talked about this the past couple of weeks. We're on week 4 or 5 of our Trivia Tuesdays. Next week, it will be sponsored by Triple Lift, and so it'll be holiday themed. So we're asking everyone to wear costumes. There will be a prize for costumes in addition to the winner of the trivia contest. I've played, it's a blast. So if you can join us, that's great. It's free to members. It's $5 if you're a non-member. And there's some really great prizes and gift cards and things like that that they've been giving out. Those are my 2 announcements. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron Frederick to introduce tonight's guest.
Well, there's not much to say about Jeff Cruz because Mr. Cruz, he's the creative director over at MRM, and he definitely carries the mantle for Adcraft on our D show, and is an all-around great guy. And I think he's going to tell us a little bit about his career. So I don't want to spoil it, but without further ado, Jeff Cruz, thanks again.
Nice. All right. Now let's see if technology plays nice and lets me share my screen. Ready for it? Everyone see it? Someone? Michelle? Ron, can you see it? Somebody?
I can see it. Yep, looks good.
Here we go. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. It's always exciting to get to talk with folks and share a little bit about, where I've been, what I've seen, and hopefully, with any luck, drop a little knowledge on you today. Ron and Michelle asked me to talk a little bit about creative process. So what you'll see today are at least one humble creative thoughts about it. And so when I kind of jumped into this whole deck and putting together some pictures and amazing things for you today, I too went to the Googles and searched and said, well, what are other people saying about the creative process? Because I'm kind of curious how my notes compared with their experiences. And so you begin to see things like this. This is one person's interpretation of the creative process. And you're going to find, even though there are multiple interpretations, there's a high level of accuracy to many of them. So yes, work begins. Yes, inherently creative tend to F off. And then panic does ensue. You cry and you get to your deadline. And I at least got to give a shout out to the creative URL, toothpastefordinner.com. But then you see people like, well, that's your creative process. I think I can build on that. And so then you see people getting to adapt and evolve it with how creativity goes up, and you run out of time before, the ideas that you had the best intentions, never get fully baked. And then you really get to get mad at yourself, and you swear that you're going to be smarter and better the next time, even if at the end of the day, that may or may not be true. And then you have people that, like to use this kind of virtual circle of how it's going. It's going to be rad. Okay, I'm getting into it, but it's hard. It's still going to be rad. And then again, a common theme, anxiety. This is garbage. I am garbage. Wait, no, this is going to be okay. And then this circle continues kind of in this clockwise fashion. Then some people get creative with how they present the creative process, and they think, no, it should be counterclockwise because that would be a creative way to do it. And they talk about things like research and ideas and inspiration and aha moments, which I feel like if you've ever approached creative or know anything about creative, occasionally you have that true aha epiphany type moment. Sometimes you just realize this is going to have to be pretty much what we need to do to get it done to hit that deadline. And then one of my actual faves was this simple one. This is in fact very telegraphic about what the creative process could be. There's, the start, and maybe that comes in the form of a brief. There's all that kind of messy chaos stuff in the middle, and then there's the end. So there's obviously a lot of theories about it, a lot of ways to talk about it, and hopefully you find some benefit for the way I talk about it with y'all today. And when I started initially thinking about it and scoping and figuring out how to do it, there's a whole lot of words when we talk about the creative process. So whether you're working for a brand agency of record that's doing more traditional stuff, or where I am now, I'm at a digital agency. So things like, A/B testing and prototypes are kind of more my, regular day. There's a billion words that can be part of the process and be considered as you can develop what could be a really great, meaningful, and successful process. So let's dive in. So before I dive in, again, I said this is one creative thought. I figured I'd tell you a little bit about my journey to where I am today as Chief Creative at MRM. And over 25 years, yes, I've seen some stuff. Hopefully you'll find out I've done some interesting stuff. And that has definitely shaped and guided my experiences and the way I approach creative today. So way back when I was young and well, this is actually before I could grow a silver beard, probably. So this is me heading off to Arizona State, where I went to school, and I got a BS in advertising. I worked a little bit in that Phoenix ad market, but proved to be a bit small. So I decided I had to make my way out to the big city and got a gig in Detroit to help launch the Pontiac Aztek. So this was back in 2000. If you ever saw the concept vehicle for the Aztek, it could have been amazing. Production made that all go away, and this is in fact what the vehicle ended up looking like. So I had to convince people that this was a really sweet car to buy. Not only did I work on Pontiac, this was at Darcy, which became Chemistry, which became Leo Burnett. I also worked on Super Bowl spots for Cadillac. Cadillac B series.
Bang.
I feel blessed to have worked on big brands and in the spirit of doing a little bit of name dropping. That is in fact Gary Sinise, who was at the time the voiceover for Cadillac. Also had the opportunity to do a custom comic book series with DC. So they're actual writers and illustrators. I did a 6 comic book series for the Pontiac Solstice, all evolving around a man's name who was Diego Rush, which was really cool. And there was chatter at one point about doing some extended content and some animated films about it, but in the end it ended up being just a really great 6-book comic book series. Also at Pontiac, a big how to create culture. Recognize that video game.
Your love for car has never been more real. Introducing the first ever Pontiac G8 GT, the most powerful car under 30 grand.
The clip on the right is one of the other spots we did for the launch of the Pontiac G8, and based on insight for anybody who's had a little brother, or if you were a little boy at one time yourself, you put your name in your cars to make sure nobody stole your shit. And that's what my son Ben did. So that's one of the fun things you sometimes get to do in advertising. You get to inject a little bit of you into your work, and that's why my son's Ben's name is on the bottom of the G8. I've also had the luxury and opportunity to work on Harley-Davidson, to launch several bikes, this one for the Black Line, including launching bikes globally, and really was an amazing opportunity. The client who was once upon a time my client at Pontiac and some other GM business went to Harley-Davidson and is actually one who helped recruit me to work at an agency for the opportunity to pitch and win work for Harley-Davidson. On the other end of the spectrum, I've done work for Clinic and Clinic. I started this work at a previous agency, and more on that in a sec. And I'm also currently working on Cleveland Clinic. And one of the, highlights of this experience is we launched a local television campaign called The Power Today that ran for 6 years in market, which anything lasting for 6 years is pretty crazy. And the CMO at the time, he used to be the CMO Delta, now is the CMO of Cleveland Clinic. He calls this out work is some of the work he's most proud of. So when you hear a client say that, you figure out somewhere along the way, you figured out the creative process and maybe you've done something right. And then while it's not a piece of work, I think how you work and your approach to work says a lot about the process. And this is actually a photo from 2018 when I received the award for the IPG Global D&I Ally of the Year. So again, I think you're going to see it later on in the program. I think how you connect with others and how you relate to others definitely has an impact on the type of work you do and making it for an enjoyable and meaningful experience, and then the process that comes with that. As I mentioned, I'm going to focus a little bit on the last 20-ish of the 25 years. So I came to Detroit in 2000 for an agency that in the end became Leo Burnett. You see my role there. I then went into work at BSA Partners, became associate partner in ECD, where I worked on Harley-Davidson and pitched a lot of business. That's where I first pitched in one Cleveland clinic. And as Ron indicated, I am now currently the chief creative at MRM in Detroit, really Birmingham. So that's enough about me. Now let's talk a little bit about the subject at hand, the creative process. So as I really began to think about this and how I wanted to present it and really, took a moment to think about how we approach things on a day-to-day basis. It was interesting because like sometimes you get so into it, you don't really think about like, am I doing A, B, C? And what I really want to talk to you about creative, and I kind of tipped my hand when Michelle and I were on right before this all started, is that I don't think this is going to be a typical what you may expect to see about you should do this and you should do this. It's not going to be an A to B about the creative process. And in fact, it's going to be about the 7 C's. And so while it's not the 7 C's of the nautical type that was there in the imagery, it really is about 7 C's that I think about when we do our jobs well as creatives and when you think about the creative process. And I'm a big believer in working well with others. And so that's across disciplines, strategy, performance and analytics, account people, project managers. You got to learn a way to play well with others. It really breaks down to what I'm calling the 7 C's. So whether they're your pillars or tenants, or even at the very least considerations, because there's another C for you about how you think and behave within creating in this process. So the first C, collaboration. Look at that fancy keynote animation. You're welcome. So I want to introduce you to somebody. This is Kenny Renard. Kenny Renard is currently the ECD of Octagon in New York, and Octagon does marketing in the sports, entertainment, and experience space. But once upon a time, Kenny Renard was the creative director working on Pontiac at Digitas, while I was the creative director working on Pontiac at Leo Burnett. And way back in the day, that made us mortal enemies. We did not get along, so we spent the large majority of our time doing amazing work for our client on behalf of Leo Burnett and Pontiac, and then we spent our extra time trying to undo the other person's work or unsell their work or tell them what our work was better than their work. And I can't remember what sparked it, but eventually Kenny and I had a huge old just come to Jesus, for lack of a better phrase, and just said, enough's enough. This is complete bullshit. We got to figure out how to work better together. We got to figure out how we're going to collaborate so that together we can create better and more compelling work for Pontiac, which was an underdog brand that needed all the help it can get. So it needed united forces. So we did that very thing. And in the end, you can even see I began to try and grow my hair like Kenny unsuccessfully. We did just that. We were able to create work together. The work was better as it worked across the traditional mediums. And Kenny was responsible for Pontiac.com and a lot of digital work when you think about banners and OLA, and social wasn't a huge thing back in the day. So this is a little predate to that. But my point being was really learning how to collaborate. You got to learn how to make friends. I'm not saying you got to get along with everybody. Well, maybe you should try and get along with everybody, but at the very least, pretend that you're going to get along with everybody, because that's really the only way you're going to get to go do great work. So this photo is actually from a shoot that we did with Kat Von D, if you recall, and maybe you don't, so Google her. I'm going to drop some cultural references on you today. Kat was the cat's meow pardon the pun, and was really great. And she had her show LA Inc. And this is when we were doing that engagement with her. And so we convinced her, hey, Kat, and Kenny and I co-pitched her on this. And I remember explicitly when we were sitting across the table from Kat and her representatives, we want you to drive around LA in a Pontiac vibe and tattoo people out of the back of it. And a little feature fact about the Pontiac vibe, it was one of the first, if not the first, that had a plug. So that's why we wanted to promote that, hey, it's got this cool plug that you can plug stuff in, whether it's a blender or a hairdryer or, I don't know, a tattoo machine. And so we went around and filmed a bunch of her, tattooing people out of the back of her vibe in and around LA. So it made for content. It became these little, maybe it wasn't pretty social, because I think we did some cut downs. We created this dedicated site where you could win an opportunity to get exclusive content from Kat, and I think there might have even been a meet and greet in there. But the really fun fact of this story is one of the people that she interviewed, and you may not be able to fully recognize her in this small little photo, is we had someone that she was supposed to tattoo. They fell out, they couldn't do it. Pontiac at the time was working with Violator, who was working with 50 Cent and Violator, and we called Violator, his management company, and said, do you have a musician who would like to get a free tattoo from Kat Von D? And they're like, yeah, we might have somebody. And we're like, are they in LA? And like, well, yeah, she is. I mean, right now she's just a really big, really breaking and killing it on the Brooklyn club scene. And we're like, yeah. Does she have a body and she's willing to get a free tattoo from Kat Von D? Because we were crunched up against a deadline. And they're like, yeah, totally. So this woman comes, gets a tattoo. If you see the rose that's on her hip, that you can see the woman checking out with the mirror, that's Lady Gaga before Lady Gaga was Lady Gaga. She was always Lady Gaga, but before she really blew up. So my point is, you don't have those types of experiences. You don't get to type breakthrough work unless you learn how to play well and collaborate with others. So that was my first C. Second C, conversation. I think as you begin to get into the game and really think about how you want to play the game, so often like we get a brief or we get an assignment and we just take it for what it is and we just run with it, and which is fine. Sometimes that's what the ask is, and you take a brief and just go make that. There are other times when why don't you pause and have a conversation and talk about it? Don't just take the marching orders. Can we talk about it? Is there a way to do this better? If they're trying to achieve certain goals or KPIs, while you're saying it should be a TV spot or an email campaign or, you know, a stunt, it might be all well and good, but can we at least talk about it and have a conversation about what maybe there's a different approach to lead to something bigger and better. And so it wouldn't be a presentation from Jeff Cruz, for anybody who's ever seen me present today, where I don't mention George Katsarelas. So George was one of those people who had the gift of gab. He could talk to anybody about anything, more often not using some colorful language along the way, but he was really a big believer in using conversation to get to better creative. And so back in 2008, we had a opportunity, and let me reset it for a moment. So 2008, 2009, things weren't going so well in Detroit. You know, bankruptcy and the like was going on, and agencies were struggling when your clients are struggling. And he saw an opportunity for Leo Burnett at the time to go do some pro bono work for Detroit Public Schools. He says, I think we need some light now. I think we need to put some good in the world and do some good. So why don't we take on this pro bono effort for Detroit Public Schools? And so he met with them and they told him, you know what, we need some print ads and we need some radio spots that are going to help drive attendance for Detroit Public Schools. Because much like other districts, they really need to drive attendance. They need to make sure that you not only go to school on the first day of school, that you are there on count day, which is big for them, so that they get the state funding that they need. And so George listened, and he understands that's a big part of conversations is knowing when to talk and knowing when to shut your pie hole and just to listen. And he listened, and he listened to what they needed. And he walked away, said, okay, look, we're interested. We want to help. Let me go back to the ranch. Let me go back to Leo Burnett and talk with my peeps. And we'll figure out what we think we can do in terms of some radio and newspaper, knowing full well that he wasn't going to do radio newspaper, because he ended up coming back and presenting to them and saying, you don't need newspaper and radio. You need something that is that's a big idea. You need something that people are truly going to rally around. You need something that's going to give people a point of pride to going to school at a Detroit public school. And so he worked with a team to create the Blue Door campaign for Detroit public schools. And it was based on the simple notion of when you walk through the blue door of Detroit public school, 100 more will open. Because despite all the problems and the challenges, and yes, there's some bad stuff and corruption and all the like, I don't need to get into it. There's a lot of amazing things going on at Detroit public schools. They had some amazing music programs. They had some amazing technology programs. At the time, you could get your pilot's license through a Detroit public school as a Detroit public schools student. So what you're seeing here is Hart Plaza. You may even see it here. Because I do too had an opportunity to work on this, and more on that in a sec. And so not only do we create 4 standalone 187 blue doors for each of the Detroit public schools at the time, we did in fact paint the front doors of every Detroit public school blue so that we could really deliver on that message. Walk through the blue doors of Detroit public school and 100 more will open. Your life will change. And so this campaign became not only the blue doors, but it wasn't about radio and TV spots. It was about a conversation that led to parades and rallies at campus marches, and having Bill Cosby, before we all found out he was a horrible human being, coming to the aid of the emergency financial manager, Robert Bob, to like get people to really engage and participate. And I was at the rally at campus marches, and you want to talk about a life-changing event? You watch 3,000 people chant, "I'm in," about going back to school. That you realize that you've changed lives, you've changed culture through work. And that's what the creative process should do. It should lead you to the ability to move people to action and really spark and ignite a community. And yes, in fact, it worked. It won the Grand Effie the following year for a simple little small campaign. And it was up against the likes. That's when Apple was introducing his apps, and Hyundai introduced Hyundai Assurance, where they would take your car back if you couldn't make your car payments. And the Grand Effie winner that year was for a small campaign convincing students to go to school at a Detroit public school. And it was interesting because when we won the award, and the way they do it, they do a countdown and they start just pulling the finalists off. And in the end, we're all losing our mind that that we won. And I had one of the judges come up to me, and he says, "Hey, I want to let you know this work won on the merit of the work and not because of the other part of the story." And the other part of the story is, probably gonna crack because I always crack. George passed before we got to do it. So George had the conversation that led to changing people's lives. And so we had a conversation, and we decided when we accept this award, we're going to George's family come with us. And that's in fact what we did. I'm going to take a little drink, so you should all take a little drink. 10 years ago, and I still crack every time I talk about that experience, and George himself. Huge mentor and a huge part, and impacted the lives of all those people in the photo and many, many beyond it. All right, change, my third C, for those who keep score at home. Change is the big one. And I love me some Clint Eastwood. I always like me some Clint Eastwood, and I thought this was a great quote. Most people are afraid of change, but if you look at it as something you can always count on, then it can be a comfort. And I think this is a really, really important part when we talk about the process, is that you have to embrace change. Change will always be part of it. Yes, it can be messy, but you can't fear it. You have to embrace it. And so whether all of a sudden you get that left curve or right curve, or clients change their mind, or you got some feedback from a creative director you didn't expect, or we had to change a heart and we're not going to run it now, we want to run it 6 months from now, but your idea was based on something that was happening right now and it doesn't work, whatever it may be, you have to embrace change. Even for brands, even for companies that are notorious for perhaps not being as open to change, which leads me to an experience I had on Harley-Davidson. So I'd like to introduce you to another person, Aidan McKiernan. Aidan was a writer for me and for our team at VSA Partners, and we got him out of Indy, and we somehow convinced him, snookered him into coming to Detroit. And we were working on a Harley-Davidson brief, and Harley-Davidson, as you might come to expect, kind of really comfortable running the same play. It was all about, you know, rebellion, and they were big about rebel, and we had another, and it was always kind of version of the same brief, but we had a brief that was all about like your legacy, and, you know, how are you going to, you know, if you ride a Harley-Davidson, that's really going to fuel your legacy and really be an iconic symbol of, you know, amazing things you do and the legacy you leave behind. And we're like, okay. And so we were pitching the work, and we did a couple campaigns. One was very much in the expected space we do. I think our line was live your legend was one approach to the brief for Harley-Davidson. But Aiden was like, hey, so I have a thought, what if we change it up a little bit and really took it? Because at the time, Harley had their diehards and their loyalists, you know, they're always going to ride Harley. They love them Harley. They love their big bagger bikes. But Harley also needed to make sure they were grooming and getting ready for the next generation. So he says, can we change it up and, you know, maybe change the tone a little bit, maybe change our approach a little bit, maybe be a little bit smarter, still very much Harley, but like I said, change it up. And so this is actually the rip video we did to pitch that idea. I'm going to show you now.
Up ahead, around that bend, down the road. Leaving your mark isn't about looking back. It's knowing you influence the future days of others by the way you live your very own. Others feed off what you bring, every mile, every moment. So let them feast. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, so long, I'm going home.
So as I said before, you have to be willing to take the shot and embrace change in the way you approach and deliver. So as proud as I am about the success and what the Detroit Public Schools was able to do, I will cop to the fact that we pitched this. They did not buy this idea. They did not do this idea. They weren't ready for that level of change. That's okay. We planted a seed, and you got to be willing to take a swing. I'm a huge baseball fan. Love me some World Series right now. You have to be able to swing the bat and realize sometimes you're going to make contact and it's going to go really far. Sometimes you're going to foul off. Sometimes you're going to whiff. But you have to have the confidence to take the swing, and that's what we did there. And another fun little side of the story is that, so I work with us on Aiden and Jesse, and every once in a while we'll text the link to that video because we all got it on our portfolio sites, and we're like, damn, that shit still holds up. And it does. So something, you know, great ideas may not get sold, but some things never change. Great ideas are great ideas. Scene number 4, conditioning. I'd like to introduce you to someone else. That handsome gentleman on the left is Matt Beasy. Matt Beasy was an account guy that I worked with back in the day at Leo Burnett, and that's one of his equally handsome sons, Dylan, and then his lovely wife, Kelly, who I'm super close with. Well, what you need to know about Matt is an ultimate athlete. He's actually, I don't think he's still doing, he's not just still doing now. At one time, he was an ultra marathon. So when you think about conditioning, that was his mindset. He knew you had to be ready to go for the long haul. In some ways, it's a series of sprints. If you are ready to embrace that, it's going to be sprint after sprint after sprint. It's a lot of work. Coming up with great work is no easy task, and it takes time and energy and effort. And like I said, you have to have that conditioning to make that go. And he brought that ultra marathon mindset to the work. So a lot of the crazy stuff that we did on Pioneer, that thing with Kat Von D, he was one of my account partners on that. And that took a while to sell and a while to get Kat Von D convinced to do it and a while to get into market. And he says, you just got to stay the course. Come on, we got to do this. We got to do this. Keep up. And so conditioning is a huge part of it. And so as much as I'm talking about Matt and my experience at Leo Burnett with him, and he was an amazing partner in running me to go to battle with, that conditioning idea carries over. So field trip to Mars is an idea that McCann did for Lockheed Martin a couple years back. I can't remember the exact count. It won 15, 16, some totally absurd number of can lines as well. And it took 2 years to get this from concept to actual living and being out there. And if you're not familiar with the work, here's another one. Google it, friends. Field trip to Mars. So what you see here is a group of elementary school students getting onto what they think is a regular bus. And as the bus pulled away from school and went around the corner, in fact, all the windows weren't windows. They were loaded with technology. So at the flip of the switch, it looked like you were riding across the surface of Mars. So it was the first ever group VR experience. But again, it took 2 years in terms of getting it sold, fine-tuning the idea, figuring out the technology. The technology worked and it didn't work. Technology worked and it didn't work. And finally getting the technology through some amazing partners that Management Forces to make it happen. You have to persevere. You have to have that condition and realize hard work doesn't come easy. Great work takes hard work. That was better said. Hard work, great work takes hard work. The same holds true for Fearless Girl. This is another one that took, I think, 18 or 19 months to finally sell. And part of it was because the initial concept wasn't right. The initial concept wasn't to put, a young girl in front of the bull on Wall Street. The original idea was to put a female bull, which you're picking up one laying down. There's no such thing as a female bull. It's a cow in front of the bull on Wall Street. Client was like, "You're out of your mind. We're not doing. There's no such thing as female bull. We're not going to put a cow next to the bull. No, we're not doing it." So they went back and they tried to sell the female bull a couple times to no avail, obviously, but they kept going and they kept going and they kept going, and they finally sold it 18 months. And I think we all know, again, not only the cultural phenomenon that it was, it too was I think a 19 can line winner, totally crushed it at the show. So it took a while to get there. But the interesting thing about work is that just because when you launch work and you put work out into the world and work in the market, doesn't mean you're ever really done. That conditioning still holds, because this is what they did a few short weeks ago, is that they put this simple, white doily thing on Fearless Girl to pay tribute to RBG. And so you always got to be thinking, realize that you're never done. And once you wrap your head around that, you really truly understand the importance of conditioning. Chaos. So I've tipped it a little bit this earlier. It is, in fact, a part of the creative process, much like change, one that you need to embrace. But there's a caveat to how you embrace it. So this was my favorite of all the things when I did my Google search of the creative process that I think was most accurate of the process. So I'm going to introduce you to yet another person. This is Don Peasley. He too is one of my account partners. He is a mentor. He's a friend. He's a fellow Adcraft board member. So shout out to Don Peasley. He is also a person who went from a big fan and believer in the power of yoga, so much so that he is now a certified yogi and probably one of the best. If you haven't had a chance, you check out the Yoga Shelter. He's pretty phenomenal. He actually did some free sessions for us during the early days of COVID virtually. He introduced me to this book. I'd screenshot this. It's definitely worth the read. Orbiting the Giant Hairball. It's acknowledging that there's chaos. The process is messy, agency messy. The whole process can get really to be much like a hairball. But this book really tells you, like, you have to orbit. You can't let yourself get absorbed into it. You can't let yourself get all wrapped up and drawn into it, because if you get consumed by the chaos, it will in fact consume you. And you need to figure out how you just orbit and work your way around and figure out where the gaps are. And that really is what Peasley taught me to do, beyond just, floating and having me read a great book, was as a partner, an account director partner, and a really close friend, is that we learned how to run the traps together, to not let each other get caught in the chaos, because sometimes you just don't even see it coming and you just get all caught up into it, and making sure, when someone gets caught up in it, you're going to be the lifeline to pull them out and say, you got to hang out here on the fray, not get absorbed in that, not get all, self caught up in the drama. Stay outside the chaos, but you have to acknowledge that it's there, because if you're going to turn a blind eye to it, and I've seen people do it, it'll wreck you as well. So acknowledge it's there, figure out the ways to run the traps, find a great running mate and a great partner, like your very own Don Peasley. And if you ever get to work with Don Peasley, you'll be glad you did, to avoid that chaos. Craft. Craft is a really important C for all the obvious reasons when you think about the process of making great creative. It actually is something that informed our current Day Show Tuesday Talk series. I'm not plugging these events because we just wrapped our last series, yesterday, but it was all based on the premise about being connected by craft. And the idea of being connected by craft is that craft has the power to connect people with each other, to connect brands with people, which is one way you can kind of interpret it and talk about it. The other thing is you talk to people who are making things and creating things and crafting things, connections are made there too. So whether it's working with a certain director or a certain post house or a certain, podcast person that's creating some amazing content, those connections are important as well. So craft is a critical part of the process. Yes, in the obvious reasons, but when you think about it, its ability to connect and form relationships between brands and people to people, because let's just make those connections too, people. So one of the people I was able to help score for the Tuesday Talk series was Rob Riley, another gentleman I'd like to introduce you to. If you're not aware, he is the global chairman for McCann World Group and has helped really re-energize and spark the move to McCann World Group being a global creative powerhouse. He was one of our speakers, and when he was talking about his interpretation and thoughts about craft, he said when he first got to World Group, one of the things he had to do is that he had his own tenets. He didn't have the 7 C's. He had some other ones about, hey, there are certain things I believe that are pertinent and relevant and always ring true to how you approach creativity and also how we need to approach our client's business. So when he had these tenets, they could have just been like, words in, Helvetica new 24-point font and a keynote or PowerPoint. And he says, no, I want to bring craft to that as well. So that's what he did. He enlisted the help of a remarkable designer who unfortunately has since passed, that creativity is the only way to survive. So these posters are living on the desktop screens of many World Group people, as well as on posters throughout McCann World Group around the globe. One of his other tenets was outthink, outwork, outcare. And he wants to make sure that we certainly live up to all three. And speaking of three for all, three magical pieces, every client, every office, every year. Rob wants to do great work for every client in that work, and not just the small, easy pro bono ones that, are kind of sometimes working on the radar, the big ones. So for us in Detroit, he wants to do 3 magical pieces for general motors. And so I loved how he talked about craft, and it's online if you want to look it up on the Adcraft Detroit YouTube channel. It's definitely worth the watch. He was pretty entertaining and inspiring. Culture, I tipped a little bit to it when I was talking about Fearless Girl, but culture is definitely part of the creative process. And I learned this lesson, it came through loud and clear during my days at Leo Burnett, and when I had the opportunity to work for Tor Mirren. Tor Mirren was the ECD at Leo Burnett for a handful of years. He then went on to resurrect Gray, made them the creative powerhouse that they were able to become and win, shit ton of awards as well. He is also now the director of communications for Apple. So he's essentially living his best life, lucky Tor. One of the things that he preached to us, and it was really part of the Leo Burnett mantra, was acts, not ads. Now, I will cop to the fact that I think many agencies now use this bit of language or use this mantra, but I will tell you back when Tor was back when we're talking about the power of humankind and really creating work that impacts human lives at Leo Burnett, and not just being acts. I mean, we were still sometimes tasked to do great TV spots, and like you saw in the catalog stuff that I shared earlier, or print ads or what. Doesn't mean we're doing them. We just knew that the ability to impact culture was greater when you think in the mindset of acts, not ads. Because that's what great work, when work is truly great, it's not just going to win awards, and it's not just going to be well designed or well crafted. Those are all important, but they're truly, truly going to impact culture. When they transcend advertising or marketing or communications, and you're playing in the space of culture, that's when the game changes. And again, so I'll just lean on probably one of the most iconic pieces of work in the last 3 years, maybe 4 years for us, Fearless Girl. And the fact that, you know, they were able to kind of bring another tribute to it using, you know, RGB as the original Fearless Girl, Fearless Woman, if you will. And its ability to, for something that happened in the US to become a global phenomenon culture, that's the bar. And that's what, you know, World Group, trust me, we're hearing all the time. Clients say it, we're guilty of saying sometimes, we want to create our Fearless Girl. What's our Fearless Girl? So culture is, when the creative process is working at its best, that's what you'll be able to do, impact culture. So, oh, wait, bonus round, folks. Not just 7 C's, I have a bonus 8 C. You're welcome. Courtesy. So courtesy, this final 8th and bonus C came from a presentation I did with my friend and colleague, Tiffany Moy Miller. She's one of our GCDs at MRM McCann, and we had the opportunity to do a presentation, not totally unlike this, at Michigan State. And we collectively were figuring out, you know, what do we want to do? We don't want it to be the same old thing. Yeah, we should show work and tell stories about where we did, and kind of like what I'm doing, you know, with y'all tonight. But what is something that we can just put out there, just gives them reason to pause, to think a little bit differently as they make their way, you know, from, you know, Michigan State into whatever their ad career or marketing career may become. And so this was the provocative statement that was on our opening slide for said Michigan State presentation. Your parents already equipped you with one of the most valuable tools in advertising, and you don't even know it. And that tool, my friends, is gratitude. You cannot underestimate the power of gratitude, or in the context of my 7, now 8 C's, courtesy. It goes a long, long way. Gratitude for who you work with. Gratitude for those who are willing to run with you. Gratitude for those who pull you out of the chaos. Gratitude for those who you inspire to make change. Gratitude for the opportunity to collaborate with someone who was once a foe that is now, Kenny is one of my best friends in the business, and in life, even beyond the business. Gratitude. It helps the process, but it's even powerful because you'll begin to see how it begins to impact your work and find its way into work. Gratitude is an amazing thing, and I think it's an underplayed card, to use another C. So don't be afraid to use it. In fact, you should be effusive in how you express and share your gratitude. So that was my 7, 8 C's. Let's just keynote presentation build, probably going faster. So there you go. Collaboration, conversation, change, conditioning, chaos, craft, culture, and courtesy. And I'm hoping there's one other beat that you saw. So as I kind of shared, you know, my approach to creative process, or what I think are the, you know, tenets or considerations for effective creative process. You probably noticed that during each of the bits of work, I didn't just share the work. I shared the people who influenced the work, who I had the opportunity to partner with. And this is what it's really about, is that, yes, process, and we all needed some process. I think it's the people that drive the process. You want people that who are going to give you high fives and hugs and the like, because this, when it's done well, this is what you should feel like. So that's why I introduced you to folks like Kenny and Peasley and my conditioning friend, Matt Beasy, because it truly is, surround yourself with great people, seek out the opportunity to work with great people, and you will do great work almost regardless of how you interpret the creative process. So finally, I'm just going to end on my own bit of advice and extend my courtesy and gratitude to y'all, and say thanks a buttload for listening to me flapped my gums for, it looked like it was probably 47 minutes. So I went a little long, apologies. And if you want to hear more or have any questions, take a screenshot, hit me up. I'm happy to talk.
Right. Thank you, sir. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I think that I loved the C's. In your spare time, after you do your creative stuff and then all of your Adcraft assignments, you should write a book. So put that on your to-do list.
That on my to-do list?
Being a dad, you know, and all that spare time.
Yeah. Spare time indeed. Yes. So apologies. I thought my timing was a little bit tighter on that, but I'm willing to hang out as long as people care to fire off questions, to answer any questions that may be out there.
Yeah, no, we do have a couple of questions. So we have one from Cam Dutton. You know Cam Dutton. You've mentioned that many creatives in marketing and advertising pick up side hustles early on in their careers. Did you have any industry side hustles after ASU?
I did. And based on that question, I think you may have perused my LinkedIn profile. Yes, during my early days of writing and trying to really develop my voice, I wrote for Slam magazine, which at the time was dubbed the original hip hop basketball magazine. But really, when we talk about basketball and culture, and you know, they had an offshoot pub called Kicks, which was all about obviously kicks, and I wrote for that as well. So when I was trying to really find a way to broaden my voice, being able to do ads for like everyday clients was great, but being able to write longer form or even sometimes 150-word profiles about amazing people in basketball, including a high school woman who averaged a quadruple double, excuse me. Yeah, so I did have my side hustle back in the day.
Great. Next one. What would you call? What's the creative work you're most proud of? Like picking your favorite child.
Yeah, picking my favorite child. It's hard for me not to say Detroit Public Schools. I mean, for lots of reasons. The George factor, first and foremost. To be able to do that, to extend his legacy, was huge. You win a Grand Effie. I mean, there's only a handful of people on earth that have Grand Effie, so I feel blessed and honored in that regard. But like I mentioned when I was, telling that story, at that same rally at Campus Marshes, that's back when Dan Rather was doing his documentary on education. And so, Peasley being shameless, and he said, "Come on, let's go talk to Dan." So we go talk to Dan Rather. And again, we're both like, "Hey, we're doing this thing for Detroit Public Schools, and we're doing it for George, and blah, blah, blah." And Dan Rather puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "You're doing a good thing." So, and you realize, pause, when you're talking about parades and people rallying about going back to school. Look, I'm like most of the people I'm probably on this call. In September, you go to school, then you go to school in May, and then you have your summer off, and then you repeat. And that's just the cycle of life. That wasn't the case in Detroit. So to get people to feel compelled and inspired to go to Detroit Public Schools, despite the fact of their woes and their challenges, and be able to do it. In fact, big part of the Grand Effie Award winner is that while we didn't stop, poor choice of words, but I needed to make my point, to stop the bleeding and losing funding, they lost a lot less because the number of butts and seats we could get on count day. And so that will forever be a game changer. But trust me, I love telling the Lady Gaga story. I've told it probably a bazillion times because it's just a quirky story. And so some of the crazy, shit we did on Pontiac, I probably could rattle off a few of those as well.
Very cool. Any other questions out there? We've got a few more minutes. If not, that's cool too.
2. It's getting off easy.
Yeah, that's, oh, hey, wait, 3. I'm currently reading The Creative Confidence by David Kelly, founder of IDEO. What is your opinion of their creative process?
So I'm a very transparent, honest person. That did not come up in my Google search.
Yep.
So I'm not really sure. But like I said, reading the books, reading what you see online, going to different experiences, you're going to take a little bit here and there. And the creative process is going to change. Each agency, each company is going to have their own unique approach. That doesn't mean you can't carry something from what you read about or experienced or worked well. I mean, I work at MRM. I can tell you there are things that I brought from my VSA Partners days, from my Leo Burnett days, and even lessons learned from way back when I was writing in Slam magazine and working for the in-house agency for the Phoenix Suns. And I just, you take it and it becomes an ever evolving thing. You got, and knowing, one of my C's was change, it's going to change. What's working now, we weren't doing prototypes. We weren't, we're doing we were used to draw frames for TV spots. Now we're like pulling images off the internet or, going out and shoot something that's kind of a poor man's version to sell spots. So, if you get something from it, great. But I will admit, I'm not as familiar with that particular content about the process.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Again, I've worked at several agencies throughout the years. Everyone's got their proprietary creative process. And again, it's your fundamentals, and you've got to kind of have some of those guidelines. But to your first two C's, collaboration and conversation, that's when you take the process and you take the assignment and you can take it and elevate it and make some magic. So nice to have that process, but
well, yeah,
oftentimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Joe Staples from the ECD from Mother LA, like he's got his highly successful
diamond
of success.
Yeah, diamond of success.
That was his approach. And when you hear him, like, yeah, that makes sense. Am I going to do the full-on diamond at MRM? Not likely, but I think there were things and definitely some, broad stroke ideas there that I'm definitely going to apply to the, our approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, this is a fun one for you. How far along are you in your ballpark bucket list?
Wow, someone really did the research or knows a little too much about me. I am, to sketch everybody up, I am on a quest to take my boys to all 30 Major League ballparks. The original plan was to do it all before my oldest graduates. He's a junior high school, so before he graduates high school. Bad pun, but we got a bit of curveball this year. We didn't do any parks, but long way to say I'm 24 of 30 parks left. And then everybody asks, which ones you got left, Cruz? I have both New Yorks, both Chicagos, Philly, and Boston. And then inevitably goes, you sold Chicago? How'd you? I saved a couple easy ones for the end, folks. I've already done Detroit, Seattle, Kansas City. So, yeah. And then our last one is funny because earlier this summer, me and the boys were like, well, we never really talked about what's going to be ballpark 30. And it's going to be Boston. So we're going to actually see 2 games in Boston. One in the Green Monster because that's where I want to sit, and then one behind home plate because that's where the boys want to sit. And then we'll make a big, because now my wife and daughter have been gracious enough, again, courtesy and gratitude, to allow us to rearrange our family vacations in the summer for ballparks.
Are you rooting for the Rays or the Dodgers?
Dodgers. My oldest is a huge Clayton Kershaw fan. So I've become a bit of a sideline Dodgers fan as well. And I got to tell you, Mookie Betts is amazing to watch right now. He's playing some great baseball.
I vote Mookie as the player of the series for sure.
Oh my gosh! I mean, one game, I was like, that's why they paid him $300 bazillion for 12 years.
All right. We have one more question, or?
Yep.
I think it's a comment from somebody Tiffany. She said, I was wondering how you'd work gratitude into the C's, but thanks for the surprise and not taking a crappy pick of me. This isn't a question, but the 9th C is for Cruz.
Yeah. Well, very kind of Tiffany saying, I'm sorry she's not lighting up my teams or text right now. But all kidding aside, that, I was really, I had a lot of gratitude, to use one of our own, to have that opportunity to co-present with her. I thought it was critically important that, obviously I am what I am. I'm, an older white gentleman, although I have Hispanic heritage, but to be able to co-present with a woman who I respect and admire greatly was an honor. So the fact that I was actually able to pull a photo, but I mean, I took it off her Facebook feed, so I'm guessing she liked it. She would put it on otherwise. So hi, Tiffany. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for our questions. So thank you so much, Jeff. We really appreciate it and everything that you do for Adcraft.
Oh, happy to do it. I'm glad you were able to assemble a few folks who are willing to listen.